So there is a bill that passed through the House. It passed through with 70 votes against by Democrats, 21 votes against by Republicans. The kind of group that voted against ran the gamut from people who are overtly anti-Semitic, like Ilhan Omar, to people who are sort of like borderline anti-Semitic, to people who are just strong free speech libertarians. The reason is a badly thought out bill. I'll explain. I'll explain also what the House thought it was doing here. So there is a bill called HR 6090. That's the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act of 2023. The bill, which is led by Representative Michael Lawler, who's a Republican from New York, has 13 Democratic co-sponsors. It will codify the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism in Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Okay, so let's explain what's going on here. Okay, right now, the reason that you are seeing a lot of angst from administrators on college campuses is because federal funding is tied to fulfillment of the Civil Rights Act. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 dictates there cannot be discrimination on the basis of shared ancestry, ethnic characteristics, or national origin. Environments of harassment on these bases can remove your federal funding at a university. So if, for example, there were to be giant rallies at a university that suggested that all black people should be re-enslaved, and the university did nothing about that, that is already illegal under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the fact that that is a violation of free speech principles. It absolutely is. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 is a full-scale violation of free speech principles. As Christopher Caldwell wrote in his book, The Age of Entitlement, this is replete throughout the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 is chock full of violations of the Constitution. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, for example, criminalizes private accommodations discriminating on the basis of various categories. Private accommodations, like you own a bed and breakfast. It criminalizes that, right? You're now called a public accommodation, and now the federal government can step in and fine, regulate you, criminally prosecute you. It's a violation of what used to be a divide between private property and public property, which is why I've always had massive problems, I've talked about this for years, with Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. I also have massive problems with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, because Title VI of the Civil Rights Act is very unclear. It obviously violates free speech principles because it says that if you create, quote, a harassing environment on, for example, a college campus or in a business that takes any sort of federal contract, the federal government can then remove money from you. And now, that being said, the Supreme Court has already cleared Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, and there appears to be no actual momentum inside Congress for getting rid of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Now, again, if you got rid of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, what would actually happen at campuses? Okay, you would have some rallies that were really bad, or maybe you wouldn't, because it would turn out that now colleges and universities would have student codes, and they would enforce their student codes. One of the great lies about universities generally, it's one of the reasons I don't like public universities nearly as much as I like private universities, generally speaking, mainly because public universities, you run into all sort of viewpoint and free speech concerns. Universities, believe it or not, were not meant to just be repositories of everyone's thought are equivalent. Universities, as we talked about at the very top, Columbia University, when it was King's College, was designed to foment particular views. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's quite good. The idea that a university actually promulgates virtue and does not take a morally relativistic stance about good and bad, that to me is a good thing. The problem with classical liberalism in general, which is sort of the idea that all viewpoints are to be treated with equal fervor. Classical liberalism only works so long as there are boundaries to the classical liberalism. Meaning that if everyone shares a basic notion of virtue, then yeah, we can have arguments within that basic notion of virtue about what's good and what's bad. But if that completely disappears, classical liberalism turns very quickly into simple moral relativism, where we're supposed to treat neo-Nazism, communism, and constitutional conservatism as exactly the same thing on a college campus. I don't think that universities have an obligation to do that. I don't. Are you looking for that perfect Mother's Day gift that will make the women in your life feel pampered and appreciated? My friends at Genucel, they've got you covered. Genucel is awesome. We've been using it in my family for years. They're offering an extra 25% off in honor of their 25th anniversary. This makes this already awesome Mother's Day sale their biggest sale ever. If you haven't tried Genucel, a great place to start is with their most popular package. That package features their Gen 90 serum, which instantly erases the wrinkles around your eyes, forehead, and mouth. It also includes their top-selling under-eye bags and puffiness serum, as well as their jawline treatment for a more contoured, defined jawline. Genucel is so confident in their product, they'll guarantee you see results in less than 12 hours or you get your money back. Celebrate the special woman in your life this Mother's Day with the world's best skincare at a once-in-a-lifetime price. Visit Genucel.com/Ben for an additional 25% off Genucel's already amazing Mother's Day sale. Right now in your order, Genucel will include a free spa box with 2 bonus gifts and free shipping. But don't wait. The sale won't last long. They have limited inventory available. That's Genucel.com/Ben. Genucel.com/Ben. Again, GENUCEL.com/Ben to get started. Okay, with that said, when it comes to Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, Title VI of the Civil Rights Act has been used by administrators on college campuses to protect their favorite intersectional minorities only. So, as we all know, if these were protests right now that were being held on college campuses, and they were calling for, say, killing black people as opposed to killing Israelis or killing Jews, if they were chanting for the elimination of an entire state, an entire Muslim state, for example, if it said Saudi Arabia ought to be wiped off the map completely, you know that the administrators would shut that down forthwith, right? Because there are groups that rank high on the intersectionality hierarchy, and those groups are preferred. Those groups are the ones you're not allowed to discriminate against. So Title VI has been unevenly applied for literally decades, which is why you can see open anti-white discrimination on campus all the damn time, even though it's forbidden by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 64. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 64 is at least facially neutral with regard to which groups can be victimized by discrimination. But in application, I have yet to see a case where anti-white discrimination, which happens all the time, harassing environments for white students on college campuses are quite real, and they've been quite real for decades. People on college campuses shouting anti-white racist slogans, that's been a thing since I was in college and long before. And nobody's ever said that's a Title VI violation. Okay, so Title VI has always been applied only to the left's favorite intersectional groups. So what the Congress was attempting to do today with this bill was to define anti-Semitism such that Jews would also be protected. Now, theoretically, white people should already be protected because, again, discrimination based on race is forbidden by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 64. Discrimination of Jews is forbidden, but discrimination against Jews is a bit of a weird category because the anti-Semitism is a category difference from racism. Anti-Semitism is not a subset of racism. It's an entirely different theory of discrimination. Not better, not worse, not more important, not less important, just different. Anti-Semitism, in its essence, is a conspiracy theory about the shadowy power of the Jews behind the institutions, about how the Jews are conspiratorially ganging up together in order to harm other people, and that's why they must be stopped. That's the common running thread of all anti-Semitism. So what Congress was trying to do was create a working definition of anti-Semitism such that they could then apply Title VI restrictions to go after the funding for the universities. That's what this bill was about. The problem is the bill fails in 2 particular ways. It fails, number one, because it obviously is unconstitutionally vague, right? It operates as yet another element of what should originally have been an unconstitutional hate speech law. As I say, all of Title VI is an unconstitutional hate speech law, but this adds to that by incorporating within it the international Holocaust remembrance definition, working definition of anti-Semitism. And that working definition of anti-Semitism has some cases that are included within it that obviously are vaguely worded, to say the least, and probably almost certainly encroach on free speech concerns, the IHRA definition. So the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, for example, which is what was codified in this House Bill 6090, it says, quote, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or their property, toward Jewish community, institutions, and religious facilities. So that's quite vague. So the IHRA then gives a bunch of examples. And some of these examples are, in fact, good examples of anti-Semitism, and some of them are quite vague in how they're worded, or in some cases, just plain overbroad. So, for example, here's an example of what's obviously anti-Semitic: calling for, aiding, or justifying the killing or harming of Jews in the name of a radical ideology or an extremist view of religion. Right? That obviously, I think everyone agrees, is anti-Semitism. Making mendacious, dehumanizing, demonizing, or stereotypical allegations about Jews as such, or the power of Jews as collective, such as especially, but not exclusively, the myth about a world Jewish conspiracy or of Jews controlling the media, economy, government, or other societal institutions. Okay, again, that seems like pretty rote anti-Semitism. But there are some of these that are overbroad. So, for example, drawing comparisons of contemporary Israeli policy to that of the Nazis. Now, I can see why the IHRA is saying that swings into anti-Semitism, because when you accuse the Jews of doing to other people what the Nazis did to the Jews, it's uncomfortably borderline anti-Semitic in the same way that it's uncomfortably borderline racist if you were to accuse black people of enslaving white people. Right? It's weird, but however, that definition may have worked better 30, 40 years ago. It doesn't particularly work well now because everyone compares everything to the Nazis. So comparing Israel to the Nazis is basically rote at this point. It's what everyone does with everyone at all times. Trump is Hitler. Biden is Hitler. Everyone is Hitler. Everyone I don't like is a Nazi. So that is now an overbroad definition. Or for example, there's a claim here. It says, using the symbols and images associated with classic anti-Semitism, e.g. claims of Jews killing Jesus or blood libel to characterize Israel or Israelis. Now, again, I know what they're going for. What they're going for is the Der Stürmer cartoon of, for example, an Israeli soldier who is drinking the blood of a Palestinian child, right? Clearly anti-Semitic. Or an Israeli soldier who is killing Jesus. And Jesus is a Palestinian, clearly anti-Semitic. However, the way this is phrased suggests that it is anti-Semitic to say that Jews killed Jesus. Well, according to the New Testament, Jews did involve themselves in the killing of Jesus. Jews, the Sanhedrin, according to again, I'm a Jew, so this is not my book. But my best understanding from all my Christian friends and from reading the New Testament is that the Jews, under the New Testament, the Jews referred Jesus for prosecution to Pontius Pilate, who then convicted, out of fear of riots, Jesus to death, and then gave the Jews the opportunity to free Jesus, and they chose not to do so. And in the book of Matthew, there's a verse where it says, his blood be upon us and our children, right? That's all from the New Testament. Hey, Christians saying all that stuff doesn't make Christians anti-Semitic. I think what the IHRA was actually going for here was a different claim, which has been rejected by the Catholic Church, which is that Jews today are collectively responsible for the death of Jesus, which is not what the Catholic Church says. It's not what Protestants say. Again, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, because again, I'm not a Christian, is that the basic idea is that all of humanity is collectively responsible for the death of Jesus. That is humanity's great sin, and Jesus wiped away original sin through his death. And Jews are a stand-in as a sinful group in the death of Jesus for everyone. Okay, put all of that aside. The definition is vague and badly worded. Okay, that is the problem with the IHRA definition here. So the problem with this bill is that in encapsulating this definition, it strays into free speech territory. Now, as I say, I'm kind of bewildered as to why everyone is now getting upset about this as opposed to, say, Title VI itself, which wildly veers into free speech territory, but I get it. I get it. So, and I agree. I think it's overbroad, and I think the definition should not be applied in American law in this way. The solution to that, by the way, is to get rid of Title VI, as I said at the very outset right here. The most important thing that fails here is that it actually doesn't achieve what it's trying to achieve. So the goal of the bill is to give the legislature an additional tool to hold Joe Biden and the White House accountable for not defunding all of these universities. Well, they can already do that. There are already letters on the books from the Department of Education. They are called Dear Colleague letters that say that the Civil Rights Act of 1964, Title VI, applies to Jews. You don't even need a definition of anti-Semitism to hold the executive branch to account. What's more important, you shouldn't do any of that anyway. You shouldn't leave it up to the executive branch. You should just defund the universities through political act. All you have to do is pass a law that says federal funds shall not be used on behalf of higher education. You should go seek private loans. That would be the actual solution to the higher education problem. But they're not going to do that. Again, I see what they're attempting to do, which is to say to Democrats, listen, we see that you only want to protect certain groups. We want to protect all the groups. And so we're going to add new definitions here that protect all the groups. But it's sort of like the argument people sometimes use with DEI, where they're like, should we abolish DEI or should we just broaden DEI to include other groups? The answer is you should abolish DEI. It's the same sort of argument. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.